The boy didn't return the next morning. Jenny noticed right away. At 7:15 sharp, her hand hovered near the griddle, already preparing the usual stack of pancakes. She even poured the water without thinking, tucked the paper straw beside the glass like she always did. But as the minutes dragged on, the familiar sound of the bell jingling above the diner door never came. The corner booth sat empty, its maroon vinyl cushion catching the morning sun. The spot had become a silent ritual between them, an unspoken contract. Now, without him, the room felt off balance, as if the diner itself noticed the missing piece. Jenny kept glancing toward the street outside, catching shadows that weren't him, hoping against reason. Each time the door opened, her heart lifted, only to settle again, heavier. At 7:40, she brought the plate to the counter anyway. 3 golden pancakes, a pat of butter slowly melting, syrup on the side. She left it where he always sat. And waited. She told herself maybe he was running late, maybe the bus had come early, maybe today was different. But Jenny had learned a long time ago that routines, especially for children who needed them, were not broken lightly. A missed breakfast could mean a dozen things, and most of them weren't good. By 8:10, she cleared the untouched plate. The pancakes had gone cold. The silence stayed with her the rest of the day. She burned 2 orders and dropped a full pot of coffee during the lunch rush. Kathy didn't comment, though she gave her a look that said more than words could. Jenny didn't explain. The ache in her chest wouldn't form into sentences. The next morning, she still set the table. This time, she didn't expect him. But when 7:15 came again and the booth remained empty, she felt the familiar drop of hope anyway. 2 regulars, Harold and Mrs. Alvarez, noticed her glancing out the window too often. Harold asked if she was okay. Jenny nodded, but her eyes betrayed her. At 7:45, just as she began to gather the napkins and syrup bottle from the booth, the diner door opened. A man stepped inside, tall, square-jawed, and dusty fatigues that looked like they hadn't been changed in days. His movements were slow but deliberate. His boots were worn. A name patch on his chest read Ramos. His eyes swept the room with trained precision, pausing when they reached the corner booth. He approached the counter. Jenny noticed his hands, rough, dirt still under the nails, a callus across the palm that looked old and deep. A wedding band on a chain around his neck. He stopped just a few feet away. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice rough like gravel. "Did a boy come in here last week? About this tall, dark hair, quiet." Jenny's throat tightened. "He came every day," she said. "Until yesterday." The man nodded, exhaling hard. His shoulders slumped slightly as though the weight of the world pressed down all at once. "I'm Staff Sergeant Mateo Ramos. That boy, Eli, is my son." Jenny's heart skipped. The name fit. Eli. "I just got back," he continued. "They didn't tell me. His aunt and uncle, the people who were caring for him, died in a car crash. No one contacted me for almost 2 weeks. Some paperwork error. He ended up in temporary placement with a cousin in town. I got here 3 days ago. I've been trying to piece together what he's been through. He won't talk." He rubbed the back of his neck. His voice broke slightly. "This morning, I asked him what he missed most. Not toys, not games. He said, pancakes. From the lady at the diner." Jenny's eyes burned. She turned away, pretending to check the coffee machine. Her hands shook. "He didn't talk much," she managed to say. "But he always finished his food." Ramos reached into his pocket and pulled out something folded, worn. A child's drawing, hastily colored. Pancakes on a plate, steam rising in loops. A woman behind a counter. The words in blocky handwriting, "Best food. Best secret." Jenny touched the edge of the drawing like it might vanish. "He said this place made him feel okay," Ramos said. Outside, the jingle of the door sounded again. They both turned. Eli stood there, framed by the morning light, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked smaller than Jenny remembered, his posture more guarded. But his eyes found hers immediately. Without a word, he crossed the floor. Ramos knelt beside him, murmured something only a father would say, then gave a gentle nudge toward the booth. Jenny didn't speak. She placed the plate down, fresh pancakes still steaming. A small pad of butter. Syrup in a little ceramic pitcher. A paper straw beside a full glass of water. Eli slid into the booth and picked up his fork. His movements were careful, respectful. He took a bite, then looked up at her. And for the first time, he smiled. It was faint, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. But it held something stronger than words, recognition, gratitude, and a sense of return. He didn't need to say anything. Jenny smiled back, brushing away the moisture in her eyes. That morning, the corner booth wasn't just full again, it was whole. Jenny didn't tell anyone about Eli's return. Not Kathy, not Harold, not the woman who always commented on the syrup being too thick. Some things were meant to stay quiet. That morning, Eli finished his pancakes in careful bites, then tucked the fork beside the plate with a precision that made her ache. Mateo waited at the counter the entire time, never rushing, just watching with that same exhausted vigilance Jenny had seen in other soldiers, men who had learned to wait in silence for the people they loved to find their way back. The next day, Eli returned again. And the day after that. Jenny kept serving his mistaken orders with the same pretend surprise, though they both understood the game now. He would give her a slight nod when he arrived, sit down without a word, and wait. Always 7:15, always the same booth. The ritual held. Word began to spread. First, it was just Harold asking about the boy. Then the town librarian came in one afternoon and mentioned seeing Eli walking home from school alone. People had long memories in towns like this, and whispers moved faster than facts. Jenny braced herself for the inevitable curiosity, the judgment that would eventually bloom. It came a week later. "He's back again?" asked a man at the counter, leaning over his coffee. "Strange how no one seems to know where he lives." Jenny didn't respond. Another day, someone left a $5 bill and a note on the table, for the little one. "Hope he's not a problem." But most weren't that kind. One customer complained to the manager, said it wasn't fair for Jenny to give away food on company time. Another muttered that children who showed up alone every day couldn't be trusted. Kathy pulled Jenny aside behind the swinging kitchen door. "You sure about this?" she asked. "Town's talking. They're saying the kid's not right. That maybe he's trouble." Jenny looked at her. "He's not trouble," she said softly. "He's hungry." That was all she said. But something was changing. She saw it in Eli's shoulders, how they'd beg *N to lift slightly when he walked in. He still didn't speak much, but once, she caught him humming. Just a few notes while waiting for his food. Another morning, he lingered an extra minute, flipping through a comic book someone had left behind. One morning, Ramos came in before Eli. He looked more rested, though lines still etched deep around his eyes. "I wanted to say thank you," he said. "Not just for the food." He reached into his jacket and handed her a worn envelope. Inside was a letter, neatly typed on VA stationery. A request for recognition, a civilian commendation for Jenny Millers, waitress at Rosie's Diner, for consistent, undocumented aid to a minor dependent of a deployed service member. "I didn't ask for this," Jenny said, surprised. "I know. That's why it matters." She didn't know what to say. The next week, the letter ended up in a frame behind the counter, next to a photo of Rosie, the original owner, who'd once fed returning troops for free during the Gulf War. The frame was crooked, the glass cracked in one corner. Jenny never fixed it. It felt right that way, earned, not polished. Then came the morning everything changed. Jenny arrived early, as usual, unlocking the doors and flipping the chairs down from the tables. The sun had just begged *N to rise when she noticed something strange outside, a group of people gathered quietly near the corner of the lot. She recognized Harold. And Kathy. and a few others, folks who rarely had anything kind to say about handouts or sympathy. At 7:15, just as Eli walked up the sidewalk, a green military Jeep pulled into the lot. It stopped near the entrance. The door opened, and out stepped a man in full dress uniform. He wasn't young, but he carried himself with precision, an officer, no doubt about it. Behind him came two more soldiers in formal attire, each carrying something. The diner went still. Jenny came outside, wiping her hands on her apron. "Miss Millers?" the officer asked. "I'm Colonel Hayes, U.S. Army. I believe you've been feeding one of our own." He gestured to Eli, who stood frozen nearby, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide. Colonel Hayes stepped forward and handed Jenny a plaque. It bore the Army insignia, a folded flag etched in brass, and her name. "For quiet service in the spirit of honor," it read. Presented to Jenny Millers, for feeding a soldier's child without question, without reward, and without delay. Behind her, the door creaked open. Customers had followed, now gathering in the morning chill. Eli stepped forward too, no longer hiding behind anyone. He stood beside her and looked up at the man who had called him one of our own. Someone began to clap. A slow, unsure sound at first. Then others joined in, Harold, then Kathy, then even the businessman who had once scoffed at free pancakes. The applause swelled until it filled the parking lot. Jenny didn't cry, but her chest felt tight, like her ribs were holding something much larger than lungs. She looked down at Eli. He was smiling now, both shy and proud. And for the first time, he reached out and took her hand. No words. Just that small, firm grip. A boy no longer invisible. A kindness no longer questioned. Back inside, the corner booth gleamed in the rising sun. The pancakes that morning were warm. And not one crumb was left behind. Word of the ceremony outside Rosie's diner traveled faster than any meal Jenny had ever served. By noon, a blurry cell phone video of the military Jeep and the plaque presentation had been shared across town, then across the county. A local news van appeared by the end of the day. The reporter asked for an interview, but Jenny politely declined. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. She had work to do, tables to wipe, coffee to pour, pancakes to flip. Kindness wasn't a headline. It was breakfast, quietly served before school. But things had changed. The next morning, a folded note was slipped under the front door. Jenny found it while unlocking. It read, "I was that hungry once too. Thank you for reminding me what mercy looks like." It was unsigned. By the end of the week, two more things happened. First, the diner began receiving deliveries they hadn't ordered, extra bags of flour, crates of eggs, gallons of syrup. Notes taped to each crate read "For the kids" or "In honor of the hungry." Second, more children started coming in. They arrived early, like Eli had. Some came alone. Some with younger siblings. Most didn't speak much. They ordered water. Jenny greeted each one the same way, with a smile, a plate of something hot, and a lie about how the kitchen had made too much again. Kathy began helping without being asked. She never said anything about her earlier warnings. She just started flipping pancakes and humming to herself. On Saturdays, she brought in extra butter she'd bought with her own money. Once, Jenny caught her leaving granola bars in kids' backpacks when they weren't looking. Harold, the old postman, took it upon himself to check on the kids who came alone. He started sitting by the window nearest the door, tipping his cap as they arrived, offering wordless reassurance. Jenny noticed how he always left 2 quarters on the counter, for the jukebox, he'd say, even though no one played it anymore. Then, one Sunday morning, a stranger entered the diner. He wore a clean, pressed suit and carried a leather briefcase. His shoes gleamed too brightly for someone local. He introduced himself as Charles Bennett, regional director for a chain of family diners across the state. "I saw the story," he explained. "More importantly, I read the comments. People want to help." Jenny narrowed her eyes, wary. She'd seen how corporations like to borrow stories for their own image. But Bennett surprised her. "I don't want to make you a mascot," he said. "I want to make you a mentor. We're opening new locations focused on community kitchens for underfed children. Veterans, too. People left behind." He slid a folder across the counter. "In exchange for a part-time leadership role, you train staff, help us create outreach guidelines, share what you've done here, we'll cover your father's medical care. All of it. Full transfer to a better facility. No more final notices, no more skipped shifts to make up the rent." Jenny stared at the folder. Then at Bennett. Then back at the folder. She didn't speak for a long time. But the decision had already been made, somewhere deep in her bones. That afternoon, she climbed the stairs above the pharmacy to her tiny apartment. She sat at the table where she used to sort bills and stared at the faded photo of her mother, the one who used to skip meals so Jenny could eat. She thought about how kindness passed between people like invisible thread, stronger than it looked, capable of holding entire lives together. By week's end, she signed the contract. Her hours at the diner adjusted, but she never fully left. She still opened the place on Tuesdays and Fridays. She still served Eli, who now came in with a few friends. She still made the accidental extra batch of pancakes each morning. But now she also traveled. She taught kitchens in other towns how to recognize the signs: the quiet child who sits alone, the one who watches food but never touches it, the hands that hover over a napkin too long. She taught them how to serve with dignity, not charity. She carried her cracked plaque with her, held together by a bit of tape. Back in Rosie's diner, the corner booth remained his. Eli still chose it, even after Ramos enrolled him in school across town. The morning ritual endured. One day, Eli brought a book and left it there. The title was worn, the spine cracked. Inside the front cover, he'd written, "For the next kid who needs a place to sit." Jenny placed the book on the shelf near the register. Soon there were more. And above them hung the framed letter from the VA. Next to it, another plaque, this one newer. It read, "Kindness isn't a handout. It's a hand held out." Customers still came and went. Some never noticed the quiet ritual in the corner booth. Some asked about the plaque. Some never did. But for those who looked closely, for those who watched the careful way a pancake was placed, the gentle refilling of a water glass, the moments when someone truly saw someone else, Rosie's Diner had become something more than a place to eat. It had become a place to heal. Winter settled over the town like a quilt stitched in silence. Sidewalks cracked under frost, breath came in clouds, and the early morning light arrived sluggishly, like even the sun wasn't sure it could carry the weight of the season. Inside Rosie's Diner, the radiator clicked and hissed, doing its best to keep the chill at bay. The smell of butter and coffee mixed with the faint scent of pine from a small artificial tree near the register. Its lights blinked unevenly, and one strand had burned out, but Jenny left it up anyway. She said it looked like hope, still trying, even when it flickered. By now, the corner booth had its own gravity. Children stopped asking if it was taken. They simply sat down, alone or in pairs, sometimes with a younger sibling asleep against their side. Pancakes arrived without being ordered. No one questioned it. No one dared. Eli's book still lived on the shelf, and next to it were now over 20 others. Some new, some old, some with crayon marks in the margins. A hand-painted sign above them read, "For the next kid who needs a place to sit." Ramos visited less often. His new posting kept him traveling, but every month a postcard arrived from some distant corner of the country. They were always addressed the same way. To Miss Jenny, caretaker of the corner booth. Each card ended the same: "He's doing well. He's smiling more. I think you gave him back something I thought was gone." Jenny kept them in a shoebox beneath the register. Not for display, just to know they were there. One Thursday, a girl named Mia came in. 7 years old, silent, with a coat 2 sizes too big and a backpack she held with both arms like it might float away. Jenny recognized the look. It was the same one Eli had worn for weeks. She served Mia oatmeal with brown sugar and a paper straw for her cocoa. Mia returned the next day. And the next. Then she stopped returning. Jenny asked around, checked the school office, even called a local shelter. But no one knew anything for sure. That silence cut the deepest. Not because Mia had disappeared, but because the world might not even notice. 3 days later, the door jingled. A young woman walked in, barely older than Jenny had been when her own mother died. She looked exhausted, cheeks hollow, hands calloused. In her arms, Mia. They sat at the counter. The woman didn't ask for a menu. She simply placed a folded note on the counter. Jenny unfolded it. "My sister told me about this place. Said you served food even when people had nothing to give. Mia hasn't spoken much since our mother passed. But she talked about pancakes. She said they were warm and quiet. She said it felt like home. I don't know what you did, but thank you. I'd like to pay for every plate you ever served her." Jenny shook her head. "She already paid," she said. The woman looked confused. Jenny motioned toward the shelf of books, the photo of Eli beside it, the small tree still blinking weakly in the window. She paid it forward. That night, when the diner closed, Jenny sat in the corner booth. It was the first time she'd ever taken a seat there. She held a cup of lukewarm coffee and listened to the silence. Not an empty silence, but the kind that came after something sacred had passed through. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, steady, like the town was being wrapped gently in forgiveness. Sometime later, a knock tapped against the window. Jenny looked up. A familiar figure stood outside. Colonel Hayes. Dressed in his uniform, coat dusted with snow, a small box under one arm. She opened the door. No words, just a nod between them. "I'm not here to make a speech," he said. "Just to deliver something." He placed the box on the counter and left as quietly as he'd arrived. Inside the box was a single coin. Heavy, engraved, and unmistakable, a military challenge coin, custom made. One side bore the insignia of the United States Army. The other, a simple inscription, "Kindness without question is enough." Jenny held it in her palm for a long time. It was cold. Then warm. She mounted it on the wall beside the VA letter and the plaque. No explanation. No frame. Just the coin, fixed there with a small nail, catching the light as the door opened each morning. Rosie's Diner never became a chain. It never expanded, never changed its name, and never turned a profit worth mentioning. But it became something else. It became a map for those who had lost their direction. A place where strangers were fed not because they earned it, but because they needed it. A quiet chapel for kindness. Years later, when Jenny grew older and her hands trembled a little more each season, the diner still stood. New waitresses came and went. New faces filled the booths. But the corner remained the same. Still warm. Still quiet. Still ready. The final note in her shoebox was written in a child's uneven handwriting. "Dear Miss Jenny, I'm going to help people now. Like you helped me. I didn't forget. I never will. Love, Eli." And beneath it, a postscript. "Tell the next kid I said the pancakes are the best."